This is Mr. Phil Hall. Can you give me your birth date, Phil?
I was born March 9th, 1945. That was the day of the biggest carpet battle bombing in Japan.
What day was that?
March 9th, 1949. Or 45, rather.
Carpet bombing meaning?
That was the biggest saturation bombing that they did in Japan to that point. Of course, it was prior to the atomic bombs.
Now Phil's here in Evansville, Indiana. What city were you born and where you live now?
Okay, I was born, my parents were farming, and I was born in a hospital in Waukesha, Wisconsin, but the farm was in the town of Eagle, Wisconsin, which was a small bedroom community for larger city, Milwaukee, Waukesha and whatnot. But there was 3 feed mills, 3 taverns, and 3 gas stations.
And now you live in Racine.
No, I live in Johnson Creek.
Johnson Creek.
Which is right on I-94 between Milwaukee and Madison, just a little closer to Madison than Milwaukee.
Okay, Phil's a Vietnam vet, and I'm going to show you one of the things he created. This is his Purple Heart stamp. And if you look at that, the Purple Heart stamp also shows the 16th Infantry from Revolutionary War all the way till recent times. And in our museum, we have the 16th Infantry represented in our World War I room, and he was part of the 16th Infantry in Vietnam with Johnny Libbs.
Also, my son, Matt, who's currently, he's a colonel, they deactivated the 2nd Battalion of 16th Infantry after Desert Storm. And then they brought it back up in the surge, 2007. And then my son, Matt, did 2 tours in Iraq, one with the 101st Division, one with the 25th. And then he was assigned to the 16th Infantry Regiment in Fort Riley, Kansas. And he was the last XO of the battalion I was in. Johnny Libbs and I were in Vietnam with, and then they deactivated it again.
So I'm going to show you just a picture of this. This is the Persian Gulf, where ironically there is his son over in the Persian Gulf and then the Afghanistan, and he was over in the same section. You look here, this is the Vietnam where his daddy and Johnny Libbs were.
Okay.
So very ironic. Now, today we had a funeral of Mr. Johnny Libbs, and I'm going to show you a picture of him, and we're talking about both Johnny and Phil during this time. And I've got a picture of Johnny right here with a book, and I'm sure Phil is in that book, and that was written about Johnny. It's called Mud Soldiers, and that was during their time in Vietnam in 1966. And that's Johnny Libbs. He's a football hero from Wrights Memorial High School, graduated in 1960, All-State, All-City, and was captain of the team. And he was a first lieutenant over in Vietnam, and he was Phil's superior, and he's been Phil's long-term friend with 12 to 15 visits over the last years. But Phil, what we want to do is ask you some questions that family would never know. This is for friends and family and for our archives here. And so you could just chronologically go start in Vietnam and tell us when you first got there, how you got there when you first met Johnny, and then talk about both of you in your unit, what you did.
Okay. So I had been in the Honor Guard unit that serves Military District of Washington in Arlington Cemetery. I attended Johnson's inaugural ball and parade, and then they at the time had Honor Guard on President Kennedy's grave, which they stopped doing at the time they started building the permanent monument that's there today. But then about the time the movie We Were Soldiers, that battle took place in Hydrang Valley with the 1st Air Cav. All of us that were enlisted under the rank of E5 or Buck Sergeant with over a year to go on our enlistments, we all got sent to the 1st Infantry Division in Vietnam. Well, they gave us about a little over 2 weeks leave before we deployed. And so we flew to Vietnam on a 707 with stewardess and movie screens. However, Johnny went over with the division. They went over by ship. So he was there before me. So I got to Vietnam, and I was privileged enough that I was still in the division base camp before getting sent to the unit, that I got to see the Bob Hope show, which I really enjoyed. So then I went to the unit and
What month and what year are we now?
Oh, you're talking between Christmas and New Year's of '65.
So that's when Bob Hope was there, so
Yeah.
that's in between 64 and 65. The end of 64.
Yeah,
beginning
he made, several tours over there, and he went to different places with his show. Joey Heatherton was the main attraction at the time. Later, Ann Margaret and Raquel Welsh and others would join it. So after that, I was sent to the unit. The unit I joined was C Company, or Charlie Company, 2nd Battalion, 16th Infantry, 1st Infantry Division. They had the nickname of Rangers, although we were the 2nd and 16th Infantry Rangers, but they weren't, as a unit, they weren't qualified like the Ranger battalions. So I got to the unit, and they sent me to supplies sergeant, where I got a helmet, web gear, backpack, and so on, and an M14 rifle. And that afternoon, I got sent out. The unit was already in the field on operations, and I flew on a Huey, my first ride on a Huey. I wondered how it was staying in the air, that vibrating thing. And doors swung wide open. And so when he landed, it was already dusk. And by the time I got filtered down to 2nd Platoon, all I could see was silhouettes of people. It was John Libbs, Lieutenant Libbs, and the Platoon Sergeant Joe Shine, and briefly touched base with him. And then there was a tall young guy there, John Noyce, and Lieutenant Libbs told me that I'd be on an M60. I'd fired expert with the M60 during training, so they put me on the M60 with John Noyce. So then we moved out, and
Tell us what an M60 is.
M60 is a 7.62 millimeter machine gun. Anyway, so I was on that with John Noyce, and then so we were out in the field already, and
That's within 2 weeks of when you hit the ground.
yeah,
You're out in the field, right?
this is like
A week.
6 days.
6 days.
Anyway, so and so on New Year's Day, the night before, we had come into a U.S. Base camp, and we got to have some. It was New Year's Eve. We got to have some beer and watch a movie. Naturally, it was Combat with Vic Morrow. Anyway, so the next day we moved out, and we had a tank following us from that base camp. And it kept getting twisted up into the jungle debris in his track when the track would start coming off. So they had to back up and get the track back, and he fell behind. Well, we came to the clearing in the jungle, which was a rice paddy area, and I had an island of jungle out in the rice paddy. As we approached it, some Viet Cong ran out the other end. That was a bad idea for them. But anyway, we went into this little island of jungle, and about the time there was a tunnel complex in it, and about the time that the tank finally caught up, was idled down, someone decided to shoot some rounds down the tunnel, see if anybody would give up, which of course weren't gonna. But anyway, the tank idled down, and then you heard the shots, and 2 guys, a rifleman, jumped off, and he sprayed us with automatic M14 bullets there. And he hit 4 guys and killed 4 guys. One of them was about 4 feet to my left, and he was shot through the back and intestines. And then After that, we were going through a village and two guys, one guy tripped off a booby trap, hit two of them were mangled with their legs bad enough that they never came back to the unit. And then two guys, one fell in a grass-covered well, and one guy fell in, and another guy fell in on top of him. I could see how one guy fell in, never understood how the second guy fell in on top of him. Anyway, that was my first 4 days in Vietnam. I was ready to go home. So we went back to the base camp, and then I would go and sit with Johnny Libbs and Joe Shine in their quarters, which was a bunker. And anyway, I wanted to know whose hands I was putting my life in, so I was just picking their brains and then assessing them, so to speak. And they weren't aware of what I was doing, but anyway, so I got to know John Libbs, and I come to respect him as a leader. He did not do anything, he would not have us do anything that he wouldn't do himself. And on occasions, he would lead various assaults and those type of things himself. And so we began to form a friendship. Although he was my commander, my lieutenant platoon leader, and there was no reason for me to challenge anything he did, so we got along and had a friendship. And then the worst battle we were in was on April 11th, 1966, the day after Easter. We were looking for a frontline, regular, full-time unit called Viet Cong D800 Battalion, somewhere between 300 and 400 soldiers, and with some North Vietnamese advisors attached. And it was a large operation, and our company had the dubious honor of finding what we were looking for.
How many were in your company? How many in your company?
134 on the morning report, because you had people into the time store in the base camp leaving, guys coming in, and guys on R&R, and guys, two guys that I can think of still today that were recovering from wounds in the base camp. So even though there were more cooks and clerks and whatnot, didn't go to the field, and there was no like in World War II where they brought hot meals up to a lot of times. The cooks didn't follow us out in the jungle, and we just ate sea rations. So anyway, in this battle the day before, we had killed three Viet Cong made the mistake of walking out in front of us and weren't aware we were there. And I was involved, as was John Libbs, in shooting those guys, and one got away wounded. Whether he went off and did a brush and died or whatever, we don't know. But so the next day, they knew we were there, and they knew we were coming. So they prepped the battlefield in what is commonly called a kill sack. And maybe look at and think of a horseshoe situation where they allow you to get inside the horseshoe, and then they form up behind you and you're encircled. And they were in trees in what they call spider hole, one man fighting positions, and on the ground maneuvering from here to there. And it ended up that during that battle, we had 80% casualties of the guys involved in the battle.
Because you got right in the middle of the horseshoe in the grass, and they were surrounding you, and they even closed up the horseshoe.
This was thick jungle, triple canopy jungle, with trees towering up to 300 feet, and then a lower level, 100, 120 feet trees, and then a brush that was lower. It was really thick. And so anyway, John sent me out on when the lead platoon made contact, and he was still assessing what we had run into. We were sitting there in a place, which happens a lot, in Vietnam. The typical engagement was that they'd fire on us and we'd fire back, and then they'd run. and we'd take 2 or 3 casualties, and maybe you were lucky enough to hit them before. But anyway, so they were still assessing the situation, and John Libbs, I was sitting there, I had a shotgun at the time. I told him, Paul, go out there about 20 meters and keep your eyes open. Well, I ended up getting pinned down out there. And as they closed the noose around us, and we were taking heavy casualties, they ordered to withdraw on the perimeter. And I was out there, and every time I moved, I got shot at. Finally, one of them behind a termite mound, which was about 4 foot high, thought I was done for and walked around the termite mound. I emptied the shotgun into him and ran back to the perimeter and where Johnny Libbs was. So some way he lost his radio, and he sent me to get a radio for him, and then later on we made an assault, and as we went out, it was Ed Riley in the lead, Lieutenant Libbs behind him, and then me and Jack Zanka. We went out and we hit a wall of fire point blank, went to the ground, and Ed Riley was killed instantly. Grenade went off behind Johnny and between me and Jackie, and wounded all 3 of us, blacked me out for a while. And so then John, when I came to, he was yelling to get back in. So we went back, and we had a log there we were laying behind.
Were you on the edge of the horseshoe then, to the edge? Is that what you
Yeah,
did?
well, we were on what was
Perimeter.
was a badly formed perimeter because it was done under fire. And it wasn't like a circle, it was more like a football shape, because you traveled 3 columns, and they just collapsed on themselves is what they did. Anyway, so then we got mortared and exchanged in small arms fire with them, where most of it was shooting back at sounds of, and although the perimeter was breached like 3 times, and but anyway, so as the battle went on, we were sustaining heavy casualties, and they were later in the afternoon, they were hollering on megaphones over top, back and forth, and we had a Vietnamese policeman. We had an interpreter too, but he was with the command group. The Vietnamese policeman with a German Shepherd dog was right behind us, and he asked him what they're saying. He said they get ready for final attack. So then John Libbs, John Noyce, and I laid behind that log, thinking, this is it. But we're going down fighting. And John got on the radio and called in artillery, said he needs artillery right now. And then so they called it in, and then he adjusted fire and brought it in. They were closer until it was like 15 yards away from us. And all kinds of tree limbs and dirt and body parts and anything you can imagine were flying through the air. And all in that, the main part of that battle was around 8 hours. The whole thing was about 12 hours, leading up to intensify and tapering off.
Phil just got a call from Scott Rutter. Tell us, Scott Rutter, he called because
Scott Rutter, in 1989, Johnny Libbs and myself and Marty Crow, who was also a lieutenant, and then the battalion's XO, Viv Underwood, were made distinguished member of the regiments. At that time, Scott Rutter was a captain, and he was the commander of Charlie Company, C-216. And we struck up a friendship, and it still goes on today. And so later in his career, after Desert Storm, he took Charlie Company to Desert Storm. And then later, in 2003 in Iraqi Freedom, he was a battalion commander with the 3rd Infantry Division out of Fort Stewart, Georgia. And he was the battalion commander of the battalion that took Baghdad Airport in 2003. He later retired and did news. He was embedded over there for Fox News as a reporter. He and I still get together and
How old is he? How old is he? He wasn't with your group in Vietnam, he's younger.
yeah, he's younger, so he'd be like 20 years younger.
Nice.
So he's probably near 60, over 60 or under 60.
Okay. And he's still active, he retired now.
No, he's been retired since shortly after the invasion of Iraq in 2003.
Yeah.
But runs a successful business.
Okay, so right now we go back to Johnny and you. If I rehash it, we've got 1,000 Viet Cong around you. You have a unit of 130, and you were in a U shape, and now they closed it in.
Yeah.
And then Johnny got a hold of radio and called in some artillery.
Yeah.
But they were pretty accurate to be just 15 yards ahead of you.
Yeah,
So he was giving them 1 degree up, a half degree up. He was giving good directions, or they could have hit you easily.
Yeah, well, certainly, but and understand that in them triple canopy high trees, that some of the rounds were hitting big limbs up there and exploding, spraying the area with splinters, tree limbs, shrapnel, and whatever. And so there was stuff falling all over, and he fired 1,140 rounds of high explosive in support of that battle. Which
Who fired that? Backup artillery?
They tried never to have a unit operating out of the range of artillery support. So this was at a forward base that they were firing artillery from.
And then you were there 8 to 12 hours. You didn't have enough ammunition. Did you run out? How were you get your ammunition?
The Army didn't have helicopters with winch on, in our unit anyway, didn't have winches. So they'd fly over and drop ammo crates. They'd come in, somebody throw smoke to mark the spot, and then they'd come in and just drop ammo crates out.
2 or 3 times if you were an 8-hour battle.
A couple times anyway, 2-3 times, yeah.
What type of bullets you used?
7.62 millimeter and then 5.56 for M16s.
And you said earlier, we were looking at some of the displays here, you could recognize an M16 and M17, or what was the AK-17? You knew that sound, you knew in your sleep, didn't you?
Yeah, AK-47s was, and the M16s, if you remember early in deployment, they had trouble with jamming. As far as, AK-47 is stamped weapon, it's not machined, and it was far more durable than the M16s initially anyway.
But before the M16 and the M14, did you use the M14? Were you like that too, or not?
Yeah, the M14 fired a 7.62 millimeter shell, the same as the M60, except the M60s were linked together. But whoever made that, so the Marines stayed with the M14s. The Army went to the M16s.
16 shots and the Vietnam's was 20 shots or 17?
Well, they had 20 round clips that you put in either weapon. And then, but to get back to, so anyway, this barrage of artillery came in and just pounded the heck out of everything. And when it lifted, you could hear them screaming and crying and whatnot over. So that broke their back. And next morning, a shot went out, and I thought here we're going kind of starting up again. But it was B Company had moved close to us during the night and stayed outside, so we didn't end up firing on each other. And then in the morning when it got light, they came in and they found one Viet Cong yet, and that was what the shot was. When they entered our perimeter and looked at the horrificness of the casualties, dead and tried, they were some of them were crying, some of them trying to bandage people, some of them wounded later all night, not bandaged.
And you said 1,100 rounds of artillery. What was the size of artillery? Would it blow a hole the size of you or deeper than that?
Oh, well, you know, it'd blow a depression maybe 5, 6 feet in diameter and then a couple feet deeper.
70 millimeters, or what were the size of the shells coming out?
They were 105 millimeter.
105.
Yeah.
How could they be that accurate? I mean, was Johnny, or you giving him radio information?
Right, yeah, John was, and then you also have an artillery forward observer that travels with the company and 2 radio men, and he would call, but he wasn't by us when this conversation, when they're hollering, so that was, Johnny called in and adjusted, bring it in closer, and
Did his radio reach that far to those guys back there?
yeah, so they had
3
yeah.
miles back, 2
Yeah,
miles?
so they had 2 types. PRC 25 was a foot long, maybe 14 inches in half a foot wide, and it had a little, it had longer distance. And they had at squad level, they had walkie-talkies, which had a limited range, but still interact with the. But so yeah, they were able to talk to the artillery directly. And then so then they.
So that night, I mean, you were 12 hours in, the next day, you thought they were gonna come after you again.
Yeah.
But they had an attrition rate of maybe 800 out of their 1,000, you had an attrition rate of 80 out of
Put the
130.
numbers at somewhere around 400 people they had.
And then the others ran.
Yeah. However, at the end of the battle, we went back to base camp and like I had non-life-threatening wounds from a grenade, and and so we were getting new troops. They gave us some soldiers out of the other companies, and they got some anyway. So, but the D-800 ceased to be. They were the casualty rate was so great, they just disbanded the unit.
That's a Viet Cong unit.
Yeah.
But you started with 130 and you ended up with probably 30?
What's that?
You started with 130, how many did you end up with the next day?
Well, so an official report says we had 35 KIA killed in action and 75 wounded. So that leaves like 20 people that weren't wounded. But however, some of the wounded, when you talk about KIAs, it's killed in action. So several guys who were wounded and extracted and taken back to the hospitals and died of wounds, they're not on the KIA list. They're classified died of wounds.
So you could have called them, it could have been another 20 or 30 then.
Well, I don't know, maybe a half a dozen or so more, yeah. And so then we went on, got back, and of course the guys that had went through there got tighter than ever, and the new guys, I never got that close to the new guys ever again. They just, it's a mental thing, a separation, that you don't want to get that close.
Say that again, repeat that, what you're saying.
So I said, when I got there, I didn't experience any of that, like the new guys stay away from him. They took care of him, melded me right in with them. After that battle, when so many of the guys, so the original guys that were still there originally that weren't killed or wounded, they were due to rotate. Now their time was gone, and so I didn't. The replacements, I never got close to them again, and I became like a squad leader, and so the closest guy I was to after that was a medic named Jimmy Stamey, and in November we had a battle where you have a medic for each platoon and then a company medic. So these 3 guys, Doc Stamey, Doc Stool, and Doc White, had all went through the medical training, and they all got sent to Charlieton. They were all killed the same day. And Jimmy was probably the closest friend that I had in the company that time. But he was a guy like, a lot of people would have said he was their closest friend, so.
Yeah. So, I mean, Phil, that's a year of a really tough time in your life. You've never been used to something like this. You grew up not shooting people. What were you growing up doing? You just on a farm, or where were you in Wisconsin?
Well, no, my dad quit farming, and I you know, did like you heard, talk about John, I delivered papers, I worked on farms, I shoveled snow, I mowed lawns. And that's what I did. I did become a hunter. I played football 2 years in high school, but I was a distance runner. I went to state both in the mile and track and in cross country.
What's your best time in the mile? Was it about
4:38.
That's pretty fast. That's pretty fast. That would have won the city here. The city in '67 won it in 4:15, but
Yeah.
4:38 would have won it then. Johnny Libbs also had some records on the 2:20.
Yeah.
I don't have his time, but he held records on the 2:20.
I think he ran 100 too, if I.
I think it was 100. Mike told me 2:20, but I think he ran 100 too.
Yeah.
Now, tell me about about 5 of you guys are still close 40, 50 years later.
Yeah.
What 5 guys is you and Johnny and a couple other guys?
Lawson Passmore. Who Lawson still alive today.
Was he here today? He wasn't here for the
No,
funeral.
he won't. I'm the only guy from Vietnam he'll talk to, and I don't think it's better. We were just that good of buddies, I guess. But Lawson, and of course, then there was my partner John Noyce, who after that operation he went to be the major's driver. So maybe 8-10 years ago, I went down to Fort Sam, Houston, and laid him to rest down there. But and a guy named Gil DeLeo, who's up in St. Paul. But other than that, as things went and people started getting together, as you saw today, we had 4 of us here today. But really, they were in different platoons than second platoon, John's platoon. So I really don't have much of a recollection of them. When you talk about going out as we did on operations, you were operated with squad and platoon level, and them were the guys you interacted with, and the other platoons were, you know, they were kind of set right there, but they were kind of separate.
You were in a certain company, and you knew your guys in your company.
Yeah.
Not as much the whole platoon.
Yeah.
And tell me how you're closest to Johnny and closest to Niece and closest to the other guy you said, but really Johnny was in the same things that you saw really tough things, and you've recovered from that. Johnny had a lot of PTSD, but Mike told us recently, or they had an interview, and he's gotten over a lot of that. He just died here recently, Johnny, but you know, there's a lot of those things it's hard for the human mind to get rid of. Can you tell how you got rid of it out of your mind?
Yes, so I say, I don't expect you to understand, I expect you to understand you don't understand. And you really can. So after Vietnam, and like I said, John and I were friends over there, but he was my commander, so we had maintained that relationship. And although we did go to town occasionally and raise into Benoit and raise ruckus but then it was actually 11 years after Vietnam, and I attributed that not as was conscious decision, but all of a sudden I started wondering where you so and so were and so. And in those days there was no email, there was no Facebook. All you had a recollection of where they were from and called information on the phone and see. So I found out I got knowing Johnny came from the candy business here in Evansville. So I called the candy store and talked to his mom, and she said Johnny was out in Keno, out in Vegas dealing Keno. Whatever that is, I never played Keno, I don't know even what it is. I play quarter slots, and that's all I'm doing for that. Anyway, so I was able to talk to him on the phone, and then I found Gil DeLeo up in St. Paul. John Noyce was a kind of a rascal. He was on the lam from the law, running around and under an alias. And anyway, so then downstream, George Wilson, the author of Mud Soldiers, was doing a book on the conscript army, the all-volunteer army, and whether it was going to work or not. He was following these guys through boot camp and infantry training, and he ended up going to the 2nd Battalion, 16th Infantry, and in the hallway they had a picture of James Robinson, a Medal of Honor winner in that battle, and he came aware of this story, so anyway, so then,
You're in that book too.
yes.
You're in that book, so's Johnny. What chapters you guys in?
It's only the first chapter in that book. The rest of the rest, it's called Legacy. The rest of the book is the guys he was following, and to tell you the truth, I never read the rest of the book. You know.
Who was following, Johnny, or who was following? This author was following all these other guys.
Yeah.
And the author's still living.
No, he's dead.
He's dead.
George, yeah.
George.
Wilson. He was the military editor for Washington Post. He knew Bernstein and
Woodford, Woodall, or whatever.
Yeah.
But this guy followed you guys around. He couldn't get Johnny to talk to him, but he finally got Johnny to talk. I think.
Well, Johnny called me.
Yes.
And he had mentioned me to George Wilson, and he called me and he said that this guy wanted to interview us. What do you think about doing that? And from the time that battle happened, I always wanted knowing what these guys went through, this struggle of life to survive. Anyway, so I said, yeah, well, let's do it. So I drove down here, and then we picked George up at that airport you and I just passed, driving right outside the door here. Anyway, and so he interviewed us at length. And then and later, the rest of the book was written. So he added this first chapter and called it Legacy. And so there's some inaccuracies, and it was due to go to press, and so we didn't get a chance to correct anything or not. What it was what it was going to be. Anyway, so.
And the picture on there has a picture of Johnny. I don't know if it's you. Picture, and those pictures, there's not a lot of pictures, but those are pictures of you guys, right?
Yeah.
So he must have thought it was pretty dynamic to come and get you, but that was probably 1980 or so. It was a long time after that when he wrote that, or was that in the 70s?
It was like 87.
87.
And
so
the
that's
book
20
came-
years later, just
Yeah,
about.
so when the book came out, in probably 88 that was, because then a guy, General Al Smith, who went through all three landings with the 1st Division at World War II, North Africa, Sicily, Omaha Beach. He was even though he was a 2-star general, retired, he was the honorary colonel of the regiment. And anyway, he got a hold of that article that was in the military journal, and so he called me up and he said, I'm just a grunt guy, right? So he called me up and we talked for about 15 minutes, and then picking who I was, I think he was anyway, and at the end he says, I'm going to make you a DMOR, what do you think of that? I said, great, what's that? He said, distinguished member of the regiment. So then the next year he already had the guys for that year, 88. So it took place in 89. And when we went out to the ceremonies, George Wilson came out there and we got the first copies of the Mud Soldiers just before it hit bookstores or whatever. And anyway, so that was 89.
And then they made a movie out of that recently, didn't they? Or they're making a
The
movie?
recent movie
What's
was,
the name of that? Who did that?
The writer-director is a guy named Todd Robinson, and the head producer that was his partner was Sidney Sherman. During late 90s, one Air Force pararescue guy that came to our aid with Air Force had helicopters and choppers with winches on them. Their mission was to go out and pick down pilots. So when they came, there was no place for Army choppers to land, and the battle was so intense that wouldn't have been vital anyway. So these Air Force guys came in and lowered a winch down and extracted some of our wounded. The second run in, an Air Force pararescue guy came down and ran a grenade. And of course, it's a Hollywood movie, so it loosely is accurate. But anyway, so when he came down, it was of his own volition, volunteered to come down and help aid, and then their helicopter was getting shot up, and they motioned for him to get on the litter and get lifted out. He waved them off and stayed stayed with us. And of course, the movies got him doing all, he lived an hour and 45 minutes plus or minus, and the perimeter was getting overrun close to where he was. And the only reason it didn't, and that's when he was killed, but then a soldier named Sergeant named Bosie Gerald threw a tear gas on a canister, which backed them out again, or who knows how far they would have got. That never made them successful, but so it backed them out again. And so Bill Pitzenbarger was put in for the Medal of Honor then, and whoever decides such things is downgraded it to the Air Force Cross, which is the second highest award. And in the late 90s, there was a move to get him the Medal of Honor again, in which I was contacted and said, could I write a statement in support? Well, he was only a short ways from me, so I observed a lot of when the noise directed me to that area that I witnessed some of his.
So you wrote him a letter of support for Medal of Honor. Did he ever get it? Never did get it?
Well, he finally got it in 2000.
Yeah.
And his dad was still alive, thankfully. And anyway, so then shortly after that, their movie people got a hold of me and asked me about the battle and where. So I became a military advisor on the movie. Yeah. And actually I do visual dialogue in the credits. I do some little talking there. But the movie, the picture just, Charlie Company is a vehicle why the episode with Pittsburgher happened. Their goal was to tell Pittsburgher's story. Yeah. And anyway, so that's right. I tried to talk him into doing more with Charlie Company, but he was set on what he was going to tell. Yeah. So, but anyway, then in recent times, at the same time, it took 20 years to get that movie made, 18 years. That one thing happened is Iraqi freedom had happened, and the tension drew away from doing it. And then, and so then I finally came out in 2019. And then since then, at the same time, a writer named Tracy Dirks was going to do a book. And then because the movie thing happened, he backed off on that. And just 3 years ago, he called me and said he's going back and finish the book. That's particular bravery. It's a good read. So he condensed down from his original goal and just down into more or less that battle with a little bit leading up and whatnot. But and so it's only a 200-page book, but it's packed with action.
More on what you did, more on what you and Johnny did.
More what
This Charlie Company did.
Yeah, so when they did Mud Soldiers, we weren't all connected again. Yeah. So I always felt someone guilty that I got to get my story told, and all these other guys didn't. So I was pretty happy, even though there's inaccuracies and guys claims they did stuff that they did. So they got to tell their story. And it's a good depiction of the battle.
Yes.
Anyway, so then after John and I got back in touch, we came down and visited, and I was down there several times, met his mother, and met his wives that he had been married to, and family, and then kept getting together. So I was trying to think, I don't think I could come up with it. I think we got together no less than 15 times or less already, and talked on the phone frequently, and we became best friends, John and I.
But you know, a lot of studies on PTSD and even veterans themselves, why we have the 48th, the American Legion, the VFWs, because families and friends, everybody doesn't want to hear our stories or hear the veteran stories as much, and they get bored with them after a while. But these legions and other things, and like, they're your confidants, and what you had with Johnny was a confidant. He knew exactly what you went through, and you knew, and Johnny couldn't talk about it with me. I didn't know what I was talking about.
So there was a bond there that even at times when we're just, you know, we just sit there and enjoy each other's company, and the bond went beyond, we didn't need to be engaged in conversation the whole time. There was just a bond there that just being together. We totally understood each other.
It's an intangible that Michael said today on one of the interviews he did recently of Johnny. He just says that Johnny would just, talk for a minute or two on the phone, but he got a little looser at the end where he would talk longer, open up more. But what you're saying, people really know each other, don't have to talk. They just sit there.
Exactly.
And they know what each other's thinking. They don't have to delay. And Johnny did a lot of jobs. It said in that interview, one of the family members said today that he'd go cut the lawn and, he was isolated. He'd clean the pool. He did jobs where he could just meditate and be in his own world.
Exactly, I did the same. So we moved my family from the village of Eagle out into, there's a section of state forest in southeastern Wisconsin. It's where the last glacier terminated 10,000 years ago. I'd come home from work and I'd go with my dogs and I'd go dig up little seedling pine trees. And the state had acquired these, what had been farm fields, and now we're part of the state. Me and the dogs would just go over, and Johnny was mowing lawns, I was going out and putting trees in the ground and meditating, and just the same thing.
Something about just being with nature and allowing your mind to wander and allow your mind just to be away. And like Michael said, that Johnny didn't want to be around a lot of people. He got over that some, but it was. You need your own time, and you don't want all the arbitrary.
And that's also hard on marriages and relationship, because how can a wife, a spouse, somebody else understand where you're at that particular time? And the VA and counseling will come up with what they call triggers, a sound, a smell. A word will put you back, and then you go into that inside your own head. I call it in your bubble, where you're in this bubble and you can see out there, but you're not reacting. You're in that space that you're in, and it's hard on relationships.
And I can see that. And we were with Johnny in 1985 or 86. We ate with him, and I told the story earlier, but he had to smell. The kitchen people were Vietnamese, and he could smell something. And the smell brought all those anxieties back and the thoughts back. We had a big thing here about World War II. It was in 2016, and I had 16 World War II, or actually 25 World War II veterans on top of a hotel here, and we had 2 big P-47s fly over not the hotel but the bank. And as soon as they heard that, nobody talked. Everybody was crying. It brought back the sound, what you said, the sound brought back memories of World War II.
You could feel that Huey, that beat of and you could actually feel the vibrations, and you may not even be able to hear it, a wop, 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 wop with that Huey. And all of a sudden you're in that mode. As a smell, if you get in a low spot in vegetations, in that decaying matter, the smell of that, it takes you right back to the jungle.
And we're getting a Huey. Huey's come here the last 3 years in a row, and it's coming in next Saturday and Sunday, and it's going to give rides, same as in Vietnam. But all these guys from Vietnam right here hear that thing. They hear it in the city flying, and it just brings a lot of those memories back. The Huey is such a unique sound.
Yes, it is, and the impact of the air, the whoop whoop and the vibration, you can feel it in your chest.
And so remember, essentially you had a lot of same habits as Johnny, going out, working with the trees, with the dogs, and he'd go out and fix the swimming pool and, cut the grass, just cut the grass. But, you had to have that solo time. And, what you're talking about, Phil's relationships, relationships with kids, with parents, with spouses, all of those becomes a little bit different for everybody. And so it's even though you did not die in Vietnam, Johnny did not die in Vietnam, it took something out of you and put something else in you that you've had. It's a wound, like somebody said today, it's a wound that doesn't heal. It's a wound that resurfaces it. You heal a little bit, and then all of a sudden you hear a sound, and boom, the wound opens up.
There's another part to this too, is that I feel obligated to remember guys, and although you names fade with over time, except your, but I still feel some obligated to the guys that didn't get the rest of their lives to think of them. And it's hard at times, but
That's a good part of human beings. I think it's one of our most cherished innate virtues is, you know, the human being loves, the human being feels, the human beings, after we lose somebody, we still keep them in our mind, keep them in our heart.
But also there's a thing, a change, that when you get to Vietnam, you're this, a guy that was just going along, had no hostilities and whatever. All of a sudden, people are getting killed, and you turn, and it needs to happen, you need to turn into this animal or this person that reacts to sounds and your adrenaline rush comes in, and then the trip back from that is long and hard, and I don't know if you totally ever, that you ever can to get totally back from that experience. Time with all things, you know, a loss of a loved one or something, and it hurts and it's traumatic, but as time goes on, you learn to, you don't forget, it still don't not hurt, it still hurts, but you know, it's distance itself over time. So, but even with that, you still have that recollection of a lost loved one, the same as you always have that recollection of being in combat and the horrificness of, if you will, of it.
Time doesn't solve all wounds.
Yeah, right.
And one of the things you said, you know, we went to a bullfight once and we saw the bull get killed, and that was so horrific. But then we, instead of leaving, we stayed. Then we saw it again and again and again. And the problem was I became jaded. It's like the same thing with you as a human being. It's not normal to kill another human being. But then for survival instincts, you have to do it, and you get in a certain mode that, and then you bring that back into regular society. It's hard for other societies. And one of the comments at the funeral today of Johnny's, Pat Cosett said the thing, you know, these guys attacked Johnny. You know, 5 of them. They were inner city people that knew they were going to take Johnny on. He was a piece of cake. Yeah. And they found out different. They found out different. And you, I guess you went and saw Johnny, or somebody went to see Johnny. But, you know, he got stabbed, but 5 of them were in the hospital in worse shape than him, and 2 of them ran away.
Yeah, 3 of them in the hospital, 2 of them ran away. You know, that sounds like it may be hard to adjust or believe even, but make no mistake, Johnny was one tough dude.
It triggered something, but he's one of the better athletes in Evansville, just gifted athlete.
But they had that training.
And ranger training, you've got to realize Rangers are, you know, they're unbelievable. They eat nails. And so he had that training that never went away.
And then he had the actual experience of scrapping for your life. And I looked at, you know, whether you thought when we were in Vietnam, you know, winning one for the Gipper, or that wasn't in your mind. It was survival and don't let the other guys down.
Yes.
And there was the 2 main goals I had, is survive and not let the other guys down. And a lot of that was, I don't want to let Johnny Libbs down.
Yeah. Well, you got a great friend there. You just think of it, and somebody said we saw him in a cast day, I can't believe he's gone. You just can't, and I still can't believe he's gone. You know, he just, you know, and some Mike had said one time he didn't smile. Every time I'd see him at Best Buy, he'd have the biggest smile. His eyes just lit up. His eyes lit up, and he smiled.
He was so pleasant to be, and so and quiet at the same time. Like I said, we just hang out together. We didn't, you know, we didn't need to necessarily engage in. But he would, you know, he would ask my advice on stuff, like the book about soldiers. He said, "What do you think about doing that?" I said, "Well, I always wanted this story told. I think we should do it, you know."
Because he might not have done it if you had encouraged him.
And then on particular Bravery, the book that came out recently, he's that same pictures on the front of there, okay? And I talked to him, the author was interacting with me, and he wanted to use that picture. And so he said, so anyway, So again, I talked to Johnny and he said, what do you think about that? I said, John, it's up to you, but I see there's nothing wrong with that. That's a famous picture.
Yeah.
But it's your decision in the end, but I you know, go ahead and do it. So they put that picture on the front of the particular bravery.
Yeah. It's an awful interesting thing. Well, I appreciate all your time, Phil, but I appreciate your time and in-depth knowledge here and sharing with Johnny. The family will like this. I'm gonna let them.
Johnny lives for me in me as long as I'm here, and possibly Johnny. My kids grew up knowing Johnny, so he'll live on in their memories, and especially my older boy went off to West Point and whatnot, but he had more interaction with my younger son Matt. It's
Yeah, well, you got a real friend there, and you understood each other, and so I'm so glad you spent some time here, came to Johnny's funeral. The family appreciate Becky and Mike and the grand.
have not come.
Oh, it's just fabulous you're here, but it tells a lot about you, but it tells a lot about Johnny. So from Evansville Wartime Museum, this is July 30th, 2025, the day that we buried Johnny Wells Libbs, 82, born in 1942, I believe.
Yes, yeah.
An extremely good friend of Phil Hall's here. Any other comments? One thing I'd like to just state on is about our next generation and what is our freedom and how good our country is, and what should the next generation do to protect our freedoms, and what about our freedoms?
Honor the Constitution, and don't give up on our Constitution, and the visions of our forefather are just as relevant today as they were when they formed this nation. And I have faith in the next generation. You hear all the time that the next generation isn't going to be. By God, they ante up just like we did each time. And each generation, these soldiers that went to Iraq and Afghanistan were just as top notch as any other soldiers.
So when you raised your hand to get in the service, what you said is, I will protect the Constitution of the United States. To protect the Constitution, if you read it and see the amendments, it's so solid, it's so good, and we have had such a good life, that your kids have had a good life, and it's partly because of what you and Johnny did, and we're so happy about that. Thank you very much, Phil.
You're welcome.